You're listening to the Everything Jewish 10 Minutes at a Time podcast, where you'll learn about every Jewish topic imaginable in about 10 minutes. And yes, I'll say it again. I am sorry in advance for how I pronounce Hebrew words. My voice isn't real. I'm an AI-generated voice. And sometimes when I try to say Hebrew, it comes out sounding like a Waze GPS stuck in Brooklyn traffic. So if Ezekiel turns into Ezekiel halfway through, just know it's not you, it's me. With that out of the way, today's topic is the Book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel is one of the most fascinating and let's be honest, strangest books in the entire Bible. If the Torah is like your solid 4-season Netflix drama, Ezekiel is more like a surreal, artsy miniseries that people watch and then argue about on Reddit. It's part prophecy, part performance art, and part cosmic vision board filled with flying creatures, dramatic speeches, and enough symbolism to keep rabbis, scholars, and mystics busy for centuries. So, who was Ezekiel? He was a priest and prophet who lived during one of the most traumatic moments in Jewish history, the Babylonian exile. Around 597 BCE, the Babylonians conquered Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and dragged many Jews, including Ezekiel, into exile in Babylon. Imagine being ripped away from your home, your community, and your spiritual center, then dropped into a foreign empire with strange gods, different food, and people who definitely don't understand why you won't eat their bacon cheeseburgers. That's the world Ezekiel lived in. Unlike Jeremiah, who stayed behind in the ruins of Jerusalem, Ezekiel was with the exiles, sharing their despair, but also becoming their voice of both judgment and hope. His name in Hebrew, Yehezkel, means God strengthens, which is exactly what his role was, to strengthen the people at a time when it felt like their story was over. He's the prophet who says, yes, things are awful, but hang on, God isn't finished with you yet. Ezekiel opens with one of the wildest visions in the entire Bible. He describes seeing 4 living creatures, each with 4 faces: a human, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. They also have wings, and they move around on wheels that are covered in eyes. If you're thinking Transformers meet Cirque du Soleil, you're in the right ballpark. This vision, often called the Merkava, or chariot vision, became the foundation for Jewish mysticism, or Kabbalah. Rabbis even warned people not to study it unless they were spiritually mature, kind of like how movie ratings tell you not to bring your 8-year-old to Deadpool. The point of the vision isn't just to freak us out. It's to show that God's presence is mobile. God isn't stuck in the destroyed temple back in Jerusalem. God's chariot can roll anywhere, even into Babylon. It's like saying, no matter where you are, whether in exile, diaspora, or even sitting in an airport with a delayed flight, God's presence is not limited by geography. One of Ezekiel's most famous visions is the Valley of Dry Bones. Picture this. Ezekiel is taken to a valley full of dried-up, scattered bones. God asks him, can these bones live? Ezekiel wisely says, only you know. Then God tells him to prophesy, and as he does, the bones rattle, come together, grow flesh, and eventually breathe again. It's basically the Bible's version of a zombie scene, but instead of horror, it's all about hope. This vision became a powerful metaphor for the Jewish people. Even when things look dead and hopeless, national renewal is possible. Jewish tradition has often connected this passage to the idea of resurrection, and modern Zionist thinkers loved it as a symbol of the Jewish people returning to their homeland after centuries in exile. It's one of those biblical images that still pops up in sermons, classrooms, and even modern music. The message? Don't count yourself out, even if you feel like a skeleton. You can be renewed. But Ezekiel wasn't just a visionary dreamer. He was also a master of dramatic symbolic acts. He didn't just talk, he performed. Once, he lay on his side for over a year to represent Israel's sins. Another time, he shaved his head and beard, then divided the hair into thirds. 1/3 burned, 1/3 struck with a sword, and 1/3 scattered in the wind. Talk about commitment to your role. If social media existed back then, Ezekiel would have been the king of viral stunts. But these weren't for likes. They were living parables. His point was to shock people awake, to say, look at what's happening. Don't ignore it. In a way, he was the original performance artist, using his own body and actions as the medium. While Jeremiah might have been the weeping prophet, Ezekiel was the street theater prophet, turning divine messages into unforgettable demonstrations. His acts showed judgment, destruction, and renewal in ways that people couldn't just scroll past. Another big theme in Ezekiel is personal responsibility. Earlier prophets often spoke about collective guilt, Israel as a whole messing up and facing consequences. Ezekiel takes it one step further. Every individual is accountable for their own actions. He says, "The soul who sins shall die," meaning you can't blame your parents, neighbors, or community for your mistakes. At the same time, you're not doomed by your past. If someone turns from wickedness, they can live. It's like divine moral math. What matters is the present choice, not just your history. This was a big shift in biblical thinking. It made religion more personal, more about your relationship with God than just your tribe's collective behavior. In modern terms, think of it as spiritual adulting. You don't get to say, "Well, my family never kept kosher, so I guess I don't have to." Ezekiel would say, "Nice try. Your choices are yours." It's both empowering and terrifying because it means you own your story. Ezekiel also paints some of the most vivid and sometimes disturbing images of God's relationship with Israel. He often uses the metaphor of marriage, portraying Israel as God's unfaithful spouse. At times, the language is raw, even shocking. Some readers today find these passages uncomfortable, and that's fair. But in Ezekiel's time, the idea was to express the deep betrayal of idolatry and injustice. When you read them with that context, it's like watching a very intense episode of a reality show about a broken relationship. But the metaphor isn't just about betrayal, it's also about reconciliation. Again and again, God says he will bring Israel back, renew the covenant, and restore the relationship. This back and forth between judgment and forgiveness is central to Ezekiel. It's not just doom and gloom. It's about a God who gets angry, yes, but who also keeps reaching out, offering second chances. It's the tough love approach, harsh when needed, but always with an eye toward eventual healing. Ezekiel's final chapters are all about restoration. He describes a rebuilt temple in great detail, down to measurements that make it feel like you're watching a very long episode of HGTV. Temple Makeover, Exile Edition. Some readers love these details, others not so much. But the point is bigger than architecture. The vision of the new temple is a symbol of God's continued presence and the hope of return. For exiles in Babylon, hearing about a future where worship would be restored was like hearing about a light at the end of the tunnel. Even today, religious Jews study these chapters as part of the larger hope for redemption. Others read them metaphorically as a symbol of spiritual renewal. Either way, it's Ezekiel's way of saying, destruction is not the final word. Yes, the temple was gone. Yes, the people were scattered, but the story wasn't over. Hope was still alive, and the future could still be rebuilt, one sacred brick at a time. On one level, Ezekiel's visions are still mysterious, packed with symbols that scholars and mystics continue to debate. But on another level, his themes are timeless. He reminds us that even when we're far from home, spiritually lost, or feeling like a pile of dry bones, renewal is possible. God's presence isn't limited to a building, a place, or even a specific country. It travels with the people. And the idea of restoration, of coming back stronger after disaster, resonates in Jewish history again and again. From exile to return, from destruction to rebuilding, Ezekiel's message has kept its spark alive for thousands of years. His book is not always the easiest read. It's challenging, bizarre, and sometimes unsettling, but it's also inspiring, imaginative, and ultimately hopeful. And maybe that's the point. Ezekiel doesn't give us a boring pep talk. He gives us a vision so strange and powerful that you can't forget it. A message that sticks with you long after the bones stop rattling. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Ezekiel may not be the easiest prophet to study, but he's one of the most fascinating. He mixes cosmic special effects, performance art, moral philosophy, tough love, and ultimate hope into one unforgettable package. His book teaches us that even when life feels scattered, broken, or dried up like bones in a desert, renewal is always possible. So the next time you feel like your life is a valley of dry bones, remember Ezekiel's vision. It's never too late for renewal, rebuilding, or rediscovering your spark. Thanks for listening to the Everything Jewish 10 Minutes at a Time podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend who might like it, or leave a positive review so others can find the show. Until next time, stay curious, Stay inspired, and maybe think twice before trying Ezekiel's original bread recipe at home. It's nutritious, yes, but let's just say it's not winning the Great British Bake Off anytime soon.